Welcome to the Pod of Most Resistance, a show that challenges the dominant narratives within American politics. I'm your host, Fan. What is the Green New Deal? And which presidential candidate has the best plan for climate change? On today's episode, we discuss the impact of the Green New Deal and why it's about much more than just the environment. The UN has declared that climate change will be irreversible if things don't change by 2030, which gives humans only 11 years to act. Climate scientists have known this for decades, yet America has failed to switch to clean energy at the same rate as other developed countries, and ranks as the #1 contributor of global carbon emissions in all of human history. Advocacy for climate action has only recently moved from the fringes to the center stage of political debates. According to a poll conducted by the group Data for Progress, the Green New Deal is popular among 59% of voters, and most, if not all, Democratic presidential candidates support sweeping climate action. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, did an MSNBC town hall back in March of 2019, and when asked why her first action was to pass the Green New Deal, she said this.
First of all, we've been here before. We've been here before with the Great Depression. We've been here before with World War II, even the Cold War. And the answer has been an ambitious and directed mobilization of the American economy to direct and solve our problem, our biggest problem. And historically speaking, we have mobilized our entire economy around war. But I thought to myself, it doesn't have to be that way, especially when our greatest existential threat is climate change. And so to get us out of this situation, to revamp our economy, to create dignified jobs for working Americans, to guarantee healthcare and elevate our educational opportunities and attainment, we will have to mobilize our entire economy around saving ourselves and taking care of this planet.
So what makes the Green New Deal different from the past? Why has it received so much attention? To quickly summarize the basic facts, the Green New Deal was actually created by the Green Party, which was the political party that nominated Jill Stein as the third-party presidential candidate in 2012 and 2016. Then, on her first day as Congresswoman, AOC kept the momentum going by launching a committee that would draft the Green New Deal resolution, which gives us the Green New Deal as many of us know it today. Now, what is the Green New Deal? As I've alluded earlier, it's simply a resolution. It doesn't contain any budget plans or policies. It's simply a document with a set of goals for how America should grow its economy and protect the environment. You can also call it a framework or guiding principles for shaping future economic and environmental policy. Here's how Vox describes it. It refers, in the loosest sense, to a massive program of investments in clean energy jobs and infrastructure meant to transform not just the energy sector, but the entire economy. Here is an abridged excerpt from the Green New Deal resolution that was proposed in Congress. The proposal passed the House, but failed in the Senate. Because Republicans are climate change deniers. It is the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal. A. To achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions. B. To create millions of good, high-wage jobs and ensure prosperity and economic security for all people. C. To invest in the infrastructure and industry of the United States. D. To secure for all people of the United States for generations to come clean air and water, climate and community resiliency. E. To promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppression of indigenous peoples, communities of color, migrant communities, deindustrialized communities, depopulated rural communities, the poor, low-income workers, and it goes on. What makes the Green New Deal revolutionary is that it's the first proposal of its kind to comprehensively address climate change implications within all sectors of our society and also to gain the support of a major political party. What makes it different from past climate action efforts is that it's not a band-aid. It's not a carbon tax riddled with corporate loopholes. It's not a plan B to escape climate change disaster by colonizing Mars or launching giant mirrors into space. In fact, It's the only feasible plan we have to save ourselves. The reason why the Green New Deal isn't just about the environment is because our economy is intertwined with how we produce and consume, and with the types of energy that fuel that consumption. Every fix Congress attempts to make to our economy has a direct and indirect impact on the financial and material well-being of Americans. Just as importantly, every decision has the potential to exacerbate or mitigate the enormous wealth gap between the rich and poor. Take, for example, the scenario of government contracts. The federal government will have the power to stipulate that companies with which it contracts for multi-billion-dollar clean energy projects must pay their workers a $15 minimum wage, allow them to unionize, and restrict pay for executives to 150 times the pay of the average worker. Now, these are just examples of what the government could demand, but when there are billions of dollars on the table, we should feel confident in demanding more from companies to protect workers. Whether politicians are conscientious of it or not, every decision will have ripples on whether the resulting economic benefits of a green revolution will go to the average American or to the top 1%. While I'm on the topic of inequality, I would be remiss not to state the fact that the richest 10% of people in the world contribute to 50% of individual consumption-based carbon emissions. And this was revealed in a study conducted by the international nonprofit Oxfam. Members of the wealthy elite, like the Koch brothers, don't want us to know this because they've spent millions of dollars to convince us that we should blame poor countries and poor people for the climate crisis, thereby stifling the demand for corporate accountability and wealthy class accountability. We cannot rely on the private sector to reduce our carbon footprint for us any longer, since decades of unfettered capitalism has more than sufficiently revealed how little corporations care about its workers, its community, or the environment. We are in fact living in an age where 70% of global carbon emissions come from just 100 companies within 3 industries. Just to clarify, this is 70% of global carbon emissions in general, whereas the 10% of people emitting half of all emissions is what we find when we just look at what individuals produce. The people doing the heaviest polluting already understand that a dramatic plan like the Green New Deal will result in a fundamental shift in power, and their priority is to protect their bottom line by making sure that we don't see the benefits of it, or better yet, are skeptical of it, and distract us with debates about personal recycling and hypothetical restrictions on meat consumption. We have a problem of perceived scarcity in this country, one of the richest countries in the world, because of massive wealth inequality. However, if climate change continues to go unchecked, we may encounter true problems of scarcity in a matter of years. That means we don't have time to think about economic and environmental issues separately or prioritize one over the other. The time is now to demand that our government upgrade our country to a clean energy economy that benefits everyone. All right, enough preaching. I'm sure you've been waiting to hear some substance. Here are a few nitty-gritty details for what the Green Revolution may look like. Let's use Senator Bernie Sanders' Climate Action Plan as our example. Sanders has released the most comprehensive and aggressive climate action policy proposal of any presidential candidate, which expands on AOC's resolution and aligns with the original goals of the Green Party. Also called the Green New Deal, this plan would cost $16 trillion. Here are some quick facts about it. It will aim to reach 100% renewable energy for electricity and transportation by no later than 2030 and complete decarbonization by 2050. Create 20 million jobs. Prioritize the transition of fossil fuel workers. Give $40 billion of the budget for underserved and under-resourced communities who often bear the burden of climate change disproportionately. Ban false solutions like nuclear power whose risks outweigh the benefits. Reduce the cost of electric vehicles and create a larger network of electric vehicle charging stations. You can find the full details at berniesanders.com. According to the plan, the Green New Deal will pay for itself over 15 years, and the cost of not doing anything is predicted to be far more than $16 trillion. I'm sure you're wondering how we're going to pay for it. Well, first, the fossil fuel industry will finally pay their fair share in taxes under this plan, since it has paid very little for the cost of climate change in the past. In the last decade, they've benefited from $50 billion in tax loopholes and subsidies, and the biggest oil companies are predicted to receive an additional $15 billion windfall as a result of the GOP tax code revisions in 2018. They don't pay for the roads they've torn up in the process of transporting oil, and they don't pay for the cost of healthcare for the communities they pollute. Second, we will need to reduce military spending on overseas oil reserves and reduce military spending overall. CNBC shared a report from the organization Securing America's Future Energy, which revealed the U.S. spends about $81 billion to protect oil supplies from around the world. Third, Democrats have entertained various kinds of taxes on the wealthy. In an interview on 60 Minutes, AOC floated the idea of an income tax as high as 70% on individuals who make more than $10 million. Senator Elizabeth Warren has proposed a wealth tax, and former Vice President Joe Biden has included a capital gains tax in his healthcare plan. And fourth, under Sanders' plan, revenue will also be generated from the income tax levied on 20 million new jobs. Now, many critics are rather quick to mock Sanders' plan by asking, to whom will these 20 million jobs go to if there aren't even that many people who are unemployed? The answer to that is simple. We will fill those jobs with people who used to work in the fossil fuel industry, people who are working jobs that pay at or below minimum wage. And here's an idea to rattle all those xenophobes out there. We could hire immigrants, because we've done it before. When there was a labor shortage during World War II, the U.S. Bracero program brought in almost 5 million legal workers from Mexico. Only this time, if the United States does expand its work visa programs, it will need to do a better job to protect the rights of those workers and offer more opportunities for granting them citizenship. But that's a topic for another episode. The Green New Deal isn't a compromise to save the environment over people, or some sort of socialist pipe dream as many skeptics may try to lead you to believe. It is, in fact, an opportunity to shift power from corporations to people, an opportunity to protect people from food shortages, commercial air and water pollution, environmentally induced chronic health conditions, and increasingly devastating natural disasters. Senator Sanders has released the most ambitious climate change plan that is nothing short of revolutionary. What separates him from other candidates is his boldness to single out the worst offenders and simultaneously address the climate crisis as a crisis of inequality. If this duality is evident to you, then it should also be clear that mocking the Green New Deal as a kitchen sink proposal, which is the criticism that the issue of jobs is irrelevant or out of scope, is undermining the massive scale of the problem. And if you're still looking for ways to differentiate Bernie Sanders from Elizabeth Warren, his Green New Deal is a far cry from the $3 trillion Warren has pledged to fight climate change. Senator Warren has recently endorsed Governor Jay Inslee's Clean Energy Plan, but what makes their combined plans less progressive than Sanders is that they don't outline any plans to force big oil companies to pay for their malfeasance or reduce military spending protecting overseas oil. They give only a cursory mention of protecting environmentally vulnerable communities who tend to be communities of color and indigenous people. And they do not include a plan for moving toward public ownership of power, which is important because for-profit utility companies currently have no incentive to quickly switch the country to a renewable energy grid. And remember how I said the government could demand federal contractors provide a $15 minimum wage, allow unions, and place a ceiling on executive salaries? Those are all details within Bernie Sanders' Workplace Democracy Plan, which is by far the most progressive labor reform proposal out of any presidential candidate. From a purely environmental standpoint, Warren and Inslee do a sufficient job of addressing climate change, but unfortunately, lack the ambition of Bernie Sanders to address widening systemic economic disparities at all intersections. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for giving us a listen. All sources will be posted on our website, resistancepod.com. If you enjoyed the program, make sure you give us 5 stars wherever you listen. You can find Pod of Most Resistance on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. See you next time on the Pod of Most Resistance.